Different today, if that's okay. I'm going to do it if it's not okay. I don't know. The second lesson and text for today comes from Paul's letter to Timothy. Do not let anyone look down on you because you are young, but be an example for the believers in your speech, your conduct, your love, your faith, your purity. Until I come, give your time to the spiritual gift that is in you, which was given to you when the prophets spoke and the elders laid hands on you. Practice these things and devote yourself to them in order that your progress may be seen by all. Watch yourself and watch your teaching. Keep on doing these things, because if you do, you will save both yourself and those who hear you. This is the lesson for the day, and by the Spirit's work among us, it becomes a word from the Lord. Amen. These keep me on track, because I do get long. You who've already had appointments with me know that. Today is going to be a mix of knowing what I do as an interim and also letting you know what happens during an interim season. It's one of my jobs to get us all on the same page, of what happens. Last week I talked to you about saying yes when you don't know what's going to be happening in the not yet of the future. It takes commitment to something or someone for you to step into that unknown. And it takes trust to commit. I chose the text for today because they tell you in a way that nothing is very different in an interim time. The unknown, the future, and the need for trust. I'm a pastor. That's who I am. I didn't start out that way. I was going to be a mechanical engineer. But I'm a pastor. And the truth is that when it becomes your calling, it's more part of your identity than it is a job. It's who you are. You know what I mean, don't you? There are things in you that are who you are. And we all have lots of identities. I'm not just a pastor. I'm a father. That's more important. I'm a husband. That's more important. I'm a citizen. I'm a teacher sometimes. I'm lots of different things, and they're who I am. And I'm glad I have those gifts and have worked at them. I'm also a really unique individual. All of us have that gift. And part of the joy in our life is figuring out how who we really are is part of the other identities we have. I'm lucky. As a pastor, I have an identity that's 20 centuries old. It starts with Paul and Timothy and all of those people that were trying to get these groups of followers gathered together to learn how. I had a visit with Frank Seaman today. Is Frank here? I don't see him. I've already run him off. No, we're best of friends. And he asked me, he said, why do you wear that out? I said, we Reformation people, we wear robes. And I said, well, number one, for most of the world, a robe now is an academic garment, not a church garment. And my robe has these chevrons on them because I got a doctor's degree and all that kind of thing. And that kind of bothers me. And actually, this garment is what they wore in the first century. It goes back to the beginnings of my identity. And it's a constant reminder to me that I carry on something that's a whole lot bigger than I am. And I'm not so important whether or not I have chevrons on another road. So that's why I do this. And it's not because I'm Episcopalian. I just want you to know that. Timothy's this young follower who wants to teach followers. And Paul is thrilled. And Paul becomes his mentor. And he wants to give him advice. And we've heard that lesson that he wants to tell him what the core stuff is in his identity, much less his job. It's good advice that has stood me in good stead for 30 plus years. And there are times that I've gotten distracted and off course, and this brings me right back to the main thing. It's been good for me. I was younger in my first call in Boerne at St. Mark, my first Presbyterian call. Ed and Lena Baxter were the Pied Pipers in my youth group. Man, what a gift from God. The truth is, I've had lots of groups and lots of youth groups and lots of sizes churches. And you know, it's when someone who's not maybe the parent of the youth that winds up in the youth group and becomes the proxy parent that makes youth groups take off. It's just amazing. It's such a wonderful thing to watch. And they were that. During that time, my daughter Jenna went to the midwinter convention for Presbyterian youth up at Mo Ranch. And man, if you haven't seen 200 or 300 Presbyterian kids get together in a program that they planned and a really good speaker, it is amazing. It's electric. So while my daughter was in high school, she wound up on the midwinter planning team. And she went off to Mo Ranch with Lita Simpson, and they had this big time. And she came back, and she came charging into the house, you know, and she was electric. She was so excited. And she said, "Dad, I'm so excited. We developed this great theme. We've got lots of activities and stuff, and we have this amazing T-shirt." Said one of the guys thought of this T-shirt. She said, "On the front it says, 'The main thing is to remember, ... And she said, and on the back it says, 'The main thing is the main thing.'" The main thing is to remember that the main thing is the main thing. That's what churches forget sometimes. So if I just opened the floor and asked you to tell me what the main thing is at the church, what do you think would happen? We're all different. We all have different reasons for being here. We all have main reasons for being here, don't we? It would be a kind of lots of different kinds of things that go on that are, and we would have an appreciation for all of the main things. But sometimes in the midst of the great causes that we work with and the deep needs that we work with and the important problems that we work with, what happens is we don't forget the main thing. We just take it for granted. And it goes to the background. That's why we need a mission study when we're in interim time and before we go looking for a pastor. We need a time to bring a bunch of things to the surface and decide which of them are important and which of them are the most important. And that's not a short time process. That's not a quick thing to do when you want to give everybody a voice and everybody a chance to hear. And so before we start thinking about who the right pastor is for us, That's a giant leap past what we need to do. What we need to do is decide who it is that we are now and what it is that we need to be and to do in the next season with a new pastor. Hopefully that you've read in the newsletter email that goes out every week some things about me as a person. And if you're not reading that thing, I'm telling you, you better start reading it. Don't look that thing over. Being an intentional part of a church life is knowing what's happening at the church. So please do that, because there's going to be a lot of things in there that are very important for the future of the church. I chose to be a Presbyterian for a lot of reasons, but one of them is one you might not think about. Do you realize that when people join this Presbyterian church, we don't ask them to be Presbyterians? The questions of church membership, the vows of church membership, don't say one thing about being a Presbyterian. Is that news to you? It's one of the great reasons I became a Presbyterian. Because the vows are about the main thing, the real main thing. Now let me see a show of hands of how many of you have taken vows and become a deacon or a ruling elder or a minister, a professional ordained minister, minister of word and sacrament, teaching elder. How many? See, that's a bunch of people. You're the Presbyterians. It doesn't make you any better or any worse than anybody in the room, does it? In fact, it does give you a different level of responsibility to the main thing. So I want to explain to everybody all over again, because there's some people in the room that aren't Presbyterians. And we're going to be in this Presbyterian process. And I don't want them to feel like outsiders, because they're not. Period. They're not. Presbyterians put a lot of thought into most everything. And usually that's because they did something stupid and they need to figure out a better way to do it. The Book of Order, the second volume of the Constitution of the Presbyterian Church, can be written, it can be a collection of the history of mistakes in the Presbyterian Church. Did you know that? It's really true. So we think a lot about a lot of things, and we devise these ways to try to do things better. And one of those things is in the selection of pastors. A congregation chooses its own pastor. From the beginning to the end, it chooses its pastor. The presbytery guides that process. We have a committee on ministry. And that committee on ministry has a liaison person who's read the manual carefully about the process of doing ministers and answers questions and fills in gaps for people who have not been on a PNC, a pastor nominating committee before, and helps them. But that person does not tell them who you have to get as a minister, and doesn't do anything like that. In fact, usually that person is a passive person that answers questions and gives advice when asked. I don't have anything to do with the PNC unless they ask me something for guidance. I'm busy. It's designed that way. And you know, the main reason is I trust God. I find that PNCs are generally pretty good about a pastor when they do their job and work at it and pray a little bit. That kind of helps. I never in my life have ever known a single name that was before a PNC. That's not going to happen. It's part of the process. So let me go back one step for the people that don't know anything about Presbyterian life and also explain something. The national governing body of the Presbyterian Church is the General Assembly. It meets every other year. It is composed of pretty much an equal number of ordained ministers and lay elders. Okay? The regional body of Presbyterian life is called the Presbytery. It's composed of, in its 3 meetings, of an equal number, roughly, of ministers and ruling elders. Okay? That's to make sure the ministers don't run the church. I bet that was a mistake back one time, a long time ago, and they found a way to solve it. Because usually, well, I won't say that. Did you know that the only body in the Presbyterian Church that's not like that is the session of a local church? Have you ever realized that? It's composed completely of lay people. Ministers can't get on a session, thank God. And the pastor is not a member of the local congregation. I'm a member of the Presbytery. This is your church, not mine. Now, recently, a few years back, the Book of Order gave the pastor the right of vote as well as moderating in the session. And that's one of the dumb things I think we're going to have to change. It makes no sense at all. If a pastor has to decide a split vote, what in the world does that say about the church? I mean, he's stepping into the middle of a split church. That's not smart. A minister needs to say, let's back up and start over again and see what we can do this better. I've never voted in anything. I don't even say abstain. Everybody just knows. And now you know. Before you look for a pastor, you have to submit a report about a mission study that you've done about the present and future ministry of this congregation. And you have to do it. It has to be congregation-wide. And because of that, it takes a while. Now, the session has hired some expert people on very good references to help guide that. And number one, it's because they need more expertise than they have as ordinary folks. And number two, they know I'm going to be busy. And I don't need to be running that. If you made me run that, I'd say goodbye today. So this group is going to come in. And because you have busy lives, and because it takes a lot of work, it takes a while. This group says that we can have a congregational kind of luncheon discussion once a month for 3 months. We'll spend a month talking about the church's past. We'll make you think about it beforehand. We'll have a discussion about the church's present. We'll think about that beforehand. And about the church's future. There will be feedback loops. And there will be chances for the people who can't come to give input to the process. But I'm telling you right now, you need to put those dates on your calendar and not put anything else on it. This is really important. And you need to tell the people that aren't here, it's really important. And everybody's voice in the body is important for the strength of the body. And the more people participate, the stronger and better pick you're going to have as a pastor. Does that make sense? Generally, common sense makes sense, in spite of the world right now we live in. But we have good sense here. So put those dates down. You will get more information and details from a team that's chosen to help lead it here. Support them. If somebody asks you if you will serve on that team, if someone asks you if you will help with something, what is your first response? What does it involve? Yes, I can do that. The mission study takes 4 or 5 months because it's 3 groups, and then you have to put it together, and then you have to get feedback, and okay? And so they will submit that to the Committee on Ministry, and the Committee on Ministry will say you did a good job and clear you to seek a pastor. And then they go to work looking at resumes and sifting, because they have a really good feel from that point on about the kind of minister they're looking for, the kind of skill set they have, and what the church needs for its future. And that's probably for the next 10 to 14 years, somewhere in there, because that's the average stay of a minister in a congregation, Presbyterian life. Okay? Because leadership, it takes a while for a leader to really get into the life of the whole congregation. So, do you realize now how important your participation is? Do I need some nods? Do you realize how important it is? I promise you that if you don't participate and you're not happy with the new minister, I will come back here and haunt you. We need your voice. We need your voice in the process more than we need your vote at the end. A congregation chooses its minister. You will vote on someone at the trust of this body that has worked so hard as a pastor nominating committee. But you will own this pastor. And that pastor will also shape your identity as a follower of Jesus in the next 14 years. So you have to have that identity now as an intentional part of your life. You have to think about the church once in a while, more than once in a while. We all need to remember that the main thing is the main thing. So what's the main thing? You heard it in the first lesson. Did you notice? You heard it in the first lesson. I'm no Greek scholar. I had enough Greek to be dangerous. But I had a paraphrase of that checked by one of the top New Testament scholars in the world. Literally, a guy named N.T. Wright, who was canon theologian for the Church of England. And he said, that's pretty much on the mark. I'll never forget that. Stay intentional about your identity in God's ownership of your life and Christ's lessons for your living. And all of the rest of life will fall into its proper place. Do not worry about tomorrow, but focus on being faithful each day. Every day has enough to keep you busy with God. Remember your identity as a follower of Christ and infuse and bless all of your other identities. You will find that in every other identity you live, life will be better, and you will do better work with God everywhere you are. Amen.